Hindemith was a true master in the great German tradition, a worthy successor to the long line of great German composers that included Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and Wagner. And in the minds of many people, he was the last of that long traditional line. Of course, people didn't always think of him that way. When Hindemith's music was first being heard in this country, there were outraged cries of ugly, shocking, dissonant, Bolshevik, unmelodic, heavy, brutal, bitter, atonal, especially atonal. That word was very loosely used in the old days to mean almost anything uncomplimentary about modern music. But Hindemith was never atonal. All his music depends in one way or another on a sense of key, or what is called tonality. Now, before we do anything else today, let's try to clear up once and for all what that word atonal means. It's really not so hard. It simply means using all the 12 different notes of the chromatic scale in such a way that no one note ever seems more important than another. In other words, in atonal music, no idea of a key or a home base is ever established as it is in the regular diatonic 7-note scale. There you are, you know where you are. But in atonal music, you don't quite know where you are tonally. Composers who write in that non-tonal way, following the system invented by Arnold Schoenberg, usually base their pieces on what's called a tone row. That is, they put all those 12 notes into a certain order of their own decision, like a scrambled scale, something like this. And then they develop the whole piece out of that 12-tone row. Now, all this is to tell you what Hindemith did not do. He was the last great German composer to resist the temptations of Schoenberg's 12-tone method, even at the risk of being called old-fashioned. But 30 years ago, when we were just beginning to know his music, he seemed anything but old-fashioned. I remember very well my first discovery of Hindemith, which was a composition by him called 3 Exercise Pieces. And I was fascinated by what seemed to me their daring and dissonance and defiance. They were fiendish. The first one starts like this, if I remember. Well, I immediately decided that Hindemith was a revolutionary, a Bolshevik. But I got a big kick out of the music because, like any other young man, I was attracted to anything that seemed defiant and shocking. But as I grew older, I began to discover that that same etude piece I had thought so shocking wasn't basically much different in its nature from, let's say, a Bach 2-part Invention. That is, it's a piece written to develop strong fingers and provide some interesting music at the same time, so the pianist doesn't get bored with practicing. Just look, here's a bit from a Bach 2-part Invention. Now, here's a bit of that Hindemith one. What's the real difference? It's only one of language. The intention is the same, not to shock, but to instruct. It's not Bolshevik, it's traditional. Only Hindemith's notes are much more advanced, as they naturally would be, being written 200 years later. And once we hear it this way, as a continuation of what Bach started, Hindemith's music suddenly begins to sound much more normal. There's nothing shocking about it, you see?